Warning, this is quite long. I tried to chop it down, but a lot of context was needed. This is a throwaway account because I don't want anyone I know to know I made this. For context, I, female 20, and my boyfriend, male 21, have been in a relationship since we were 15. For the sake of this post, I will call my sister Jenna and my boyfriend Chris. I first noticed Jenna's, female 22, jealousy since Chris and I first got together when we were 15. Jenna always got attention from men, and I never did. She always had a boyfriend or some sort of hookup, and it was easy for her to constantly have one because she was a teenage boy's fantasy. Her makeup was always done, she had an hourglass figure, big breasts, short skirts, and crop tops. I was the complete opposite. I was an awkward teenager with a small group of similarly awkward friends. I didn't show off my body because I was not confident with it at all. I was always chubby and never really motivated to do much about it until I joined an after-school sports club in our small town. It was there that I met Chris, who I formed a friendship with very quickly, and soon enough, a relationship. That was the only male attention I'd ever had, but I didn't care about that. He accepted me when I was overweight, and when I started getting into shape, he congratulated me but reminded me constantly that he loves me regardless of what I look like. After a few months of dating, I introduced Chris to the family, and he started coming over nearly every day as he not only got along well with the household, but also because his family life was very hostile and hurtful. Anyway, Jenna started making remarks about my weight, even though I had lost quite a lot, and said that Chris deserved a pretty girl like her. She would wear skimpy clothes around Chris and subtly flirted with him all the time. But he never entertained it, at least not in front of me. Shortly after he turned 17, Chris moved in. We have a big house, so we were able to do this thankfully, and both of us will always be grateful for my parents taking him in, considering the abuse he was suffering from his parents. Despite having a big house, Chris and I still had to share a room. Jenna was now 18 and had dropped out. Her reason for doing so, I am not sure, but she was home constantly and had no intention of getting a job, despite mom and dad repeatedly nagging her to. Chris had also practically dropped out, but at least had a part-time job. I continued going to college, meaning I was gone from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. The thought of leaving Chris at home with my sister while both parents were at work, meaning they were alone together most of the day, discouraged me, but I did not want to be a jealous girlfriend, so I never brought it up. I noticed that they were kind of touchy with each other as the months went by. It was little things, like, for example, if they were both in the kitchen at the same time, Chris would put his hands on her hips as he passed her by. Friday nights would be mine and Chris's movie nights, but she found any excuse to come into our room with us and join in, or would sometimes whisk him away to her room to play video games together. I did eventually bring it up to both of them, and they told me I was just jealous and insecure. Jenna specifically said I would always be that fat, insecure girl, and that I was freaking out because I knew she could steal Chris from me in a heartbeat. It devastated me. A month after she said that, she found out she was pregnant. Everyone was confused because she hadn't mentioned any boyfriend or anything like that at the time. She said it must have been when she hooked up with a random guy from the club. In time, she had the baby, and we all looked after her. Especially Chris, who sometimes sat with Jenna and the baby. I will call her Lily for anonymity, for hours watching TV, calling it family time. Again, I didn't want to look insecure and prove Jenna right, so I kept quiet. Fast forward to 2023. Chris and I welcomed our son in May. I will call him Miles for the post, and Chris barely pays him any attention. He gave more affection to Lily, who wasn't even his own child. I confronted him about it, and this time everyone hopped on my case, including my parents. I was accused of letting my personal insecurities drive a wedge between the family and that I was jealous of Jenna. I protested that this was not the case, and that I was just pointing out that my child was not being treated fairly by his own father, no less. My parents concluded that I either left it alone or I found my own place, and considering I was working a minimum wage job, I was unable to afford that at the time. So I chose to just ignore both of them and accept the relationship as basically over at this point. Chris and I no longer went on dates, he didn't come to my scans when I was pregnant, and nor did he come to Miles's appointments. So it shouldn't have surprised me that in August, after coming back home from taking Miles to a doctor's appointment, I walked into Chris and Jenna having intimacy in our bedroom. They had left Lily downstairs on her own, unattended. I pulled out my phone and recorded both of them squirming around, trying to cover themselves, and screamed at them before taking Miles with me to a friend's house after telling her the situation. Both of them laughed as I left the house crying with a screaming infant. I called my parents to let them know the situation, and they defended Chris and Jenna, saying sometimes things happen and people fall for each other. I hung up and stayed with my friend for the next week. Eventually, I did have to come back, but I avoided any type of communication with Chris or Jenna. It was completely awkward. Nobody initiated a breakup talk or a conversation about what I had seen, and I was strangely okay with that at this point. That was until Jenna fell pregnant in September. That was my final straw, so I arranged to move in with my friend and took all of mine and Miles's things with me. My parents argued with me about it, but Chris and Jenna expressed relief that we were leaving. Chris didn't even say goodbye to Miles. I felt like I had not done me or my child justice and had a burning desire for revenge. So when Jenna stupidly invited my friend to her baby shower this month, I saw the perfect opportunity to out them. By now, they were publicly in a relationship and they'd made a narrative that I was hurtful to Chris, so he left me and found solace in Jenna. On 15th of February, I left Miles with my friend. Shout out to her, by the way. She has been more of a second parent to him than Chris ever was, and I pulled up to Jenna's baby shower. When I walked into the venue, I felt absolute satisfaction watching Chris and Jenna's faces drop. Jenna began to cuss and told our cousin to get me out of the baby shower, but I refused to budge. I publicly called them out for having an affair and questioned the paternity of Lily. I then showed the video to everyone in attendance, including my parents. Some people looked at Jenna and Chris in disgust. Some people looked at me in disgust and told me it was not the time nor place. I left after that and was messaged by several people at the party saying that I'd caused a scene and was a terrible person. Am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. One way to get even is child support. Also, go live your best life and never look back. I bet eventually your parent will start begging for involvement with Miles and me, and I would tell them, too bad, so sad for you. Comment 2. Be the first to file for child support. If sister reaches out, congratulate her for hooking up with a cheater and wish the two of them a long and miserable life. Now, for the update. Thanks for the comments on my last post, it means a lot, so things have been rough since I last wrote. After the baby shower fiasco, I thought I'd feel some sort of relief, but it was the opposite. I was a mess, and the only thing keeping me together was Miles. My friend, bless her, has been an angel through all of this. She's been helping me with Miles and giving me a place to stay. A couple of days after the baby shower, my mom called. She was crying, saying she was sorry for not believing me and that she saw the true colors of Jenna and Chris. She begged me to come back home, but I couldn't. I just couldn't face that house again. Not after everything. I told her I needed space and hung up. Then, out of nowhere, Chris showed up at my friend's place. He had the nerve to say he missed Miles and wanted to be a part of his life. I was furious. After ignoring his own son for months, now he wanted to play daddy? I told him to leave, but he wouldn't budge. He said he made a mistake and that he wanted to fix things. I didn't buy it for a second. But here's where it gets complicated. My friend, she's been great, but she's also been struggling financially. She sat me down and told me she couldn't afford to keep us for much longer. I was stuck with a big decision. I had nowhere to go, no money, and a baby to take care of. In a moment of weakness, I called my mom back. She offered to help me get an apartment if I agreed to let Chris see Miles. I was torn. I didn't want that man anywhere near my son, but I also needed to think about Miles's future. After a sleepless night, I agreed. I moved into the apartment, and it's been... Okay, Chris has been coming around to see Miles, and it's like he's trying to play the perfect dad. It makes my skin crawl, but Miles seems happy when he's around. I keep telling myself it's for my son, that he deserves to have his father in his life, even if I can't stand the sight of him. And then Jenna had her baby. It was a boy, and they named him something pretentious. My parents are over the moon, acting like one big happy family. It's like they've completely forgotten what Jenna and Chris did to me. They've been sending me pictures and updates as if I would care. It's like they're rubbing salt in the wound. But the real kicker came yesterday. Jenna's baby. He looks nothing like Chris. I mean, babies change, but there's something about his eyes, his nose. It's like a punch in the gut every time I see a picture. And I can't help but wonder, is Chris even the father? Or was Jenna's story about a random hookup at the club true? I'm trying to focus on Miles and our little life together, but it's hard. I feel like I'm living in some twisted soap opera where I'm the only one who doesn't know the full script. I keep telling myself that I'm doing the right thing for my son, but deep down, I know I'm just trying to keep the peace. I'm accepting a terrible situation because I don't see any other way out. Thanks for reading. My ex-husband ditched our autistic daughter for 21 years and lied about his income. So I took him to court and watched as his fiancée left him at the altar. My 48-year-old female, 20-year-old daughter is severely autistic. I had spent the last nearly 21 years since she was born in a perpetual state of taking care of an increasingly growing and increasingly strong infant. My ex, 49-year-old male, divorced me when she was 4. He did not bother fighting for custody. He said he was going to elect to do only visitation because he wanted to save me lawyer money. And then when he was supposed to visit, he didn't. He saw her a total of 7 times in the first 8 years after our divorce. So I was on my own. I got myself back into the workplace and now work for a real estate investment company with offices here and abroad. But I was still overwhelmed working and dealing with my daughter's needs. I've had to deal with everybody else's 2 cents about all these resources available. They'd spend 2 seconds copy and pasting the search results under Help for Autistic Parents and expect me to come back a day later and tell them they've solved all my problems with their research. The problem is they aren't witnessing the wait lists, understaffing, underfunding, and everything else that stands in the way of help. I have given up my social, romantic life and many of the career advancement goals I've had because of her. I decided that when my daughter turned 18, things would change. Surprisingly, my ex started coming around when she was 16 and said that he wants to step up. He offered to help me make plans for when she turns 18, including figuring out how to set her up to receive disability payments and navigating group home options. I had had the opportunity for years to work abroad as part of the company I've been at for over a decade because of my proficiency in German. I've been unable to do that beyond sporadic business trips. My ex and I agreed that until she was off a group home waitlist, he would take her. I started taking long business trips abroad, but still had an apartment here, and sent my ex money for caregiving. Finally, after 2 years, a spot opened up. A few weeks after she was placed, my ex told me he wants to move states to be with his girlfriend. Meanwhile, I accepted a long-term assignment abroad and broke my lease. My support groups lash out at me and claim that I need to once again stay in the US because they claim if I'm not accessible, bad apple caregivers might get ideas. And gave me a whole list of ways to keep them accountable, including apparently establishing a rapport and visiting at different times but consistently that I cannot do while abroad. I have been enjoying my job and life for the first time when I thought I'd never have the chance. I have a few friends I can actually commit to plans with now. I've gone out with coworkers, out on dates, had fun for once. I decided to stay abroad and my ex when I asked if he could take the not-too-bad drive back up to check on our daughter. He got defensive and said this is both of us starting new chapters. Am I the idiot? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, you have been doing truly good work to care for your daughter and find her appropriate care and resources. I know not every home is great, but my brothers have both worked for years as support staff in group homes for adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and it can be a great place for your daughter to live and thrive. Your ex is trash, but you knew that, and I think you are doing the best you can with the resources you have. Comment 2. I don't think you're a jerk for wanting to go live your life now that your daughter is an adult. But, I mean, you can't find the time to go visit her a few times a year? Whether your ex visits her or not is neither here nor there because, as you said, he saw her a total of 7 times between the ages of 4 and 12. He's not the one that raised her, and therefore she's not going to be wondering where he is, she's going to be wondering where you are. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. Things have escalated since then. Just when I thought I could breathe, my ex dropped a news. He's not just moving states, he's planning to marry his girlfriend and adopt her kids. He wants to wipe his slate clean like our daughter never existed. I was fuming. How could he just abandon her again, especially now? I had to act fast. I couldn't let him get away with this. I started digging into his finances, and guess what? Turns out he's been lying about his income to avoid paying more for our daughter's care. He's got investments I never knew about, and here I was sending him money. I got a lawyer, a real shark, and we took him to court. It was a mess. He tried to charm the judge, but the evidence was too strong. The judge was furious, and my ex was ordered to pay a hefty sum for back support and to continue contributing to our daughter's care. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to make sure he never forgot his responsibility. So I made a bold move. I contacted his girlfriend and laid it all out. The lies, the money, everything. She was shocked. She had no idea. Long story short, the wedding's off and he's scrambling to pick up the pieces of his perfect little life. Meanwhile, I've been keeping a close eye on the group home. I've hired a local advocate to make surprise visits and report back. They've been great, and my daughter seems to be doing well. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And work? Work has been amazing. I've been promoted and I'm now leading a major project. It's been a long time coming, but I'm finally where I want to be professionally. I've also started dating someone. He's understanding and supportive, and for the first time in a long time, I feel happy. It's like I'm finally living my life, not just surviving it. Thanks for reading. My husband ignores me when I'm sick, but expects royal treatment and messages his ex. So I call his sister and we plot a therapy intervention that makes him face the music. Me, 41 years old, and my husband, 42 years old, have been together for 20 years. We've had our ups and downs over the years and even had couples therapy we had to stop recently as I'm on maternity leave and had to cut back. Our relationship was always good before we had our first child, 7-year-old girl, but then stress, anxiety got to him and he's changed over these last few years. He's always had a mean, nasty side, nothing physical, and up until our couples counseling, he would never apologize for the nasty things he'd say. After arguments, we'd always be okay and go back to normal. There's always been tension between us whenever he's gotten ill, nothing serious, just colds. As he says, I don't have empathy, sympathy for him, and don't seem to care. He'll spend the time in bed or on the sofa and will be off work for the week. I'm rarely ill. However, when I do get a cold, I just get on with life and look after the household and kids. I'm ill and feel crappy. However, life doesn't stop and kids have to be looked after. So I push through it. We've recently had a baby, 6-month-old boy, so I'm on maternity leave and got ill. I've never been as ill with a cold before. However, I also had a fever on and off for a week, so was experiencing headaches, cold sweats, hot flushes, and eventually, the doctors gave me antibiotics as they suspected I had a respiratory infection. During my worst week, it was half-term for my daughter, so she was home, and I also had the baby to look after. My husband had been ill the week before and was still recovering. However, he went back to work. He works from home, so he is only in the outside office. But he said he'd rather be working than be in the house with the kids, so he left me to it. In that week, I wouldn't say he checked up on me or offered to get me anything, and just kept himself in the office working. Routines were the same, and I still put my daughter to bed. And I'd also like to point out I was sleeping on the floor of my daughter's room in a sleeping bag, and did for 2 weeks as I didn't want to disturb him or the baby who was in our bedroom as I was coughing during the night. This week, it seems he's caught what I had. I'm a lot better, but still recovering. But since Sunday, he's had a fever and is now experiencing the symptoms I had. I asked him if he'd be moving into my daughter's bedroom so me, my daughter, and the baby would sleep in our bedroom. But he refused and said he wanted our bed. So I moved the baby into my daughter's room, and the 3 of us slept in there. Over the next couple of days, he's been constantly in bed. He's expected me to look after the children and also nurse him. The first day, he called me up to the bedroom and told me he was so weak he needed me to put paracetamol in his mouth and hold the glass of water to his lips. Later, he sent me a message asking me to make him some lunch and to cut it up into bite-sized pieces. I'd had enough by that point and told him I'm sure he was capable of getting out of bed to do this himself. This is where the argument started. He told me I wasn't compassionate, and I had a terrible bedside manner. I'm not denying my sympathy for him is low, We've always argued when he's ill, as I've always told him it's just a cold, and he needs to just get on with it. The argument escalated the next day when I mentioned the ensuite was disgusting. I intended to clean it. He then started saying again that I don't seem to care about him, and that I'd left him upstairs alone and wasn't checking up on him and making sure he was okay. I pointed out the week before he was happy to leave me on my own with the kids while I was ill, and didn't check up on me or offer to get me anything. He told me I must have had more energy than him. However, it's not that I have more energy. I have to look after the kids. He then went off at me shouting and screaming that I was a witch, a cow, a freaking witch, and banging his hands on the worktop. For someone with no energy, he seemed to suddenly have a lot of it. This also all happened in front of the baby. Obviously, he doesn't understand. But the raised voices would have alarmed him. He later apologized for what he said. But I'm wondering, am I the jerk for not being sympathetic when he's ill and not being his nursemaid? Now, for a few comments before the update, comment 1. If a grown man asked me to put medicine in his mouth and a glass of water up to his lips when he had a simple cold, I would be so turned off forever. I don't think I could ever have intimacy with him again. Comment 2. Not the jerk, your reactions are the result of his actions. He wasn't there for you, so you feel the same way. I am sorry you are going through a bad marriage with kids, especially with a newborn. Now for the update, thanks for sticking around for another update. So after the whole fiasco with my husband being sick and calling me names, you'd think things would calm down, right? Wrong. It's like I'm living in a never-ending soap opera. The day after our blowout, I found out he'd been messaging his ex. Yeah, the one he always claimed was just a friend. I stumbled upon their texts when his phone buzzed while he was in the shower, and curiosity got the better of me. They were planning to meet up to talk about old times. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I confronted him about it, and he had the audacity to turn it around on me, saying I invaded his privacy and that they were just catching up. But come on, who does that when they're supposedly too weak to even take paracetamol? I was fuming, but I didn't kick him out or anything. I just stewed in my own anger and took care of the kids like I always do. Then, as if that wasn't enough, my 7-year-old started acting out at school. Her teacher called me in for a meeting, saying she'd been hitting other kids and throwing tantrums. When I asked her what was wrong, she said she was upset because Daddy was always yelling and Mommy was always sad. It broke my heart. I realized then that our issues were affecting her, and I felt so guilty for not shielding her from our mess. I tried to talk to my husband about it, but he just brushed it off, saying kids are resilient and she'll get over it. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let my daughter grow up thinking this was normal. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called his sister. She's always been the no-nonsense type, and I figured she might knock some sense into him. She came over the next day, and boy, did she lay into him. She told him he was acting like a spoiled brat, and that he needed to step up as a husband and a father. She even offered to take the kids for a few days so we could sort things out. I was grateful, but also a little embarrassed that it had come to this. While the kids were away, we had a long, hard talk. I told him I was at my breaking point and that things needed to change. He actually listened this time, and we agreed to start therapy again once I'm back at work and we can afford it. We also decided to have a weekly check-in with each other, just to talk about how we're feeling and what's going on with us. It's been a few days since that talk, and things are a bit better. He's been more attentive, and I've been trying to let go of my resentment. But I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. Every time I look at him, I see the man who called me names and tried to meet up with his ex. I'm not sure if I can ever fully trust him again, but I'm willing to try for the sake of our family. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!